mother of that poor family. Well, joining me now is Cheryl Dorsey. She's a retired Los Angeles police sergeant. Cheryl, that mother's pain, just too often repeated around the country, but particularly in Chicago. Can you help me, can you help our viewers understand just how we arrived here in Chicago? I mean, the statistics are off the wall. 4 people died, 24 have been shot in shootings in Chicago just since noon yesterday.
Well, first let me express my condolences to the family, and as a mother, my heart breaks for this family, for this untimely death of this beautiful young woman. And so how we got here, you know, I don't know, but thankfully we have, it looks like, in the place of a police chief, someone who's taking an affirmative action to try to right things. But I mean, his hands are full. His plate is full. He has errant officers that he has to deal with in terms of the Laquan McDonald shooting and having to recommend termination. He has violence that is seemingly out of control, and so there's not one thing that's going to fix this, and it's certainly going to take some time. We understand that guns are coming into Chicago from Indiana, where their laws are a little looser, and so it's imperative that we do something about the gun laws, and then we make sure that there's teeth behind the consequences for criminals who engage in criminal activity.
Do you, I mean, you mentioned one thing there, gun laws in a neighboring state, because people will often say Chicago has tough gun laws, but we've heard this and we've seen this in the statistics that many of these guns come across the border from a state that has less severe gun laws. What else makes a difference in your experience to stop a cycle like this?
Well, clearly, I mean, if these career criminals had still been behind bars, they would not have been on the street. We understand that, you know, bullets have no name, and clearly they were not intending for this lady to be a victim, but yet she was. And so how did they get out? And then I read that there's regulations within that city that allow free time, even though they had monitored bracelets that they were wearing. What does that mean? How do you get to do the kinds of things that they did and then get free time while you're out?
Now, Chicago is really off the charts in terms of numbers, but you do see evidence of, in other cities, at least, not back to the levels of the 80s, but violent crime rising. Do you trust Washington, do you trust the federal government, Congress, to make a positive difference here?
Well, I think it's going to happen at the state level. And so that police department, like I said, they have their hands full. And the onus is on them to rein in the activity that's occurring. And so I don't know, you know, what their deployment needs are. I don't know the number of officers they have out on the street, and understanding all the turmoil that is going on within that department. My hope and prayer is that the officers are not pulling back in terms of enforcement activities, because we've heard time and time again when police feel picked upon, when they feel like they don't have the support of the higher ups, sometimes some officers may not provide the kind of service that the public expects. And I pray that that's not the case here in Chicago. But what else would it be?
That's a real problem. We saw that here in New York City. I mean, there was talk of that a few weeks and months ago about cops pulling back under that sort of criticism. I mean, it's a difficult balance for communities to strike when you have, you know, a spike in violence like this, but also allegations you mentioned of police misconduct. This small number, but still allegations.
Exactly. And listen, we understand that crime happens everywhere, and so no one is immune. But how is it that in certain parts of every city, more affluent areas are not run amok with violent activity? So how is it that officers manage to curb that kind of activity in some areas and it goes unchecked in others? I don't understand. If they're providing the same service for everybody, you would think that the end result would be the same for everybody. That would not be tolerated in an affluent area, I don't believe.
Now, isn't there evidence that violence feeds violence, that some of these, and it's something learned over the last years and decades, right, that crimes kind of feed off each other and lead to more crimes? Was that your experience in L.A.?
Well, listen, I mean, you can say that, but also I understand that police conduct themselves differently in certain parts of town. And we've heard that, and so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. We heard that in the DOJ report in Baltimore, that police officers comport themselves differently in higher economic areas than they do in lower economic areas. And so if they can prevent and prohibit activity in one part of town, how is it that it goes unchecked in another part of town?
If you were in charge, and there was one change you could make to stop the cycle of violence like we're seeing now in Chicago, what would you do?
I think I would increase the penalty for those who commit violent crimes. How did these young men get out there? Career criminals, obviously, they have little regard for life and property and that sort of thing. So how is it that they were out on the streets anyway? I think if you don't have a real consequence for bad behavior, then you don't deter it. We're not deterring the criminal behavior that's going on in that city when you have career criminals doing the same types of things over and over and over.
Well, Cheryl Dorsey, it's been great to have you on and use some of your expertise and experience to get to the bottom of this. Thanks for taking time this Sunday.
Thank you for having me.